So in the 1930s in Spain, from 1936 through 1939, civil war is being waged. On defense are the Spanish Republicans. These are the members of and supporters of the Popular Front government that won a narrow election victory in 1936, but is, though called Republican, really supported by an alliance of center left politicians like Americans, progressives, and Democrats, um, supported also by a group of anarcho syndicalists who believe in sort of a destructured, decentralized social communitarianism. They're also supported by communists and by the Soviet Union, who is going to become more and more important and has fighting for them a series of international brigades, including a group of Americans called the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. Attacking them from the south is the National Front, or the Nationalists in Spain. The National Front includes the ultra-Catholic Carlists, the sort of left-wing fascists, the Spanish Phalangists, and their martyred symbol of a leader, Jose Antonio Primo de Rivera. But the heart of the Spanish nationalists are the Spanish army, led by General Francisco Franco, and including the Spanish Foreign Legion, whose slogan is "Long live death," and these are a bunch of scary, scary fellows. When the war starts, the government seems to have a lot of advantages, but the Spanish nationalists are working their way from the exterior edges of Spain inward towards Manila. And the armies of the Republic seem to have trouble fighting the Spanish army and its nationalist cause. So, how do foreign powers get involved in this ongoing struggle in Spain? Well, the Western powers, Britain and France, they try to set up a series of arms embargoes and sanctions against both sides to try to prevent the war from getting out of hand. It's very utopian, very pacifistic. There are sanctions also. In effect, they do nothing significant. They're a problem when you're trying to ship in arms. But both sides have exterior powers acting as patrons to help them. The Soviet Union goes all in to help the Spanish nationalists because if they succeed, you have a communist government in Russia, a communist government in Spain that could soon take over Portugal, and Europe is now affected by communists on both extremes, and you end up having a communist sandwich where the edges of the bread get bigger and bigger, and the non-communist sections are weakened from both sides. So the Soviets send tanks, they send generals, they send the NKVD secret police, they send all sorts of military aid and support. The Germans and the Italians do the same thing for the nationalists. The Germans establish what is known as the Condor Legion, which is a reference to the great South American bird of the Andes, where Spain ruled in Chile and Argentina back in the day. The German Condor Legion includes tanks, troops, planes, and they're going to fight on the side of the nationalists. So the Spanish Civil War very quickly becomes a proxy war between fascists and Nazis on the one side and communists on the other side. There is a viciousness in the Spanish Civil War that is absolutely typical of civil wars. No mercy, no quarter, mutilating the captured wounded, mutilating enemy dead. A sense that the enemy doesn't just need to be defeated, they need to be wiped off the face of the earth, and that nothing is too extreme or brutal for them, that they deserve the worst actions that we can conceive of, cutting out the eyes of the dead or the prisoner. It's just brutal, nasty, vicious stuff. In this war, very famously, a line is given by General Emilio Mola, whose nationalist army is now approaching and surrounding the city of Madrid, the capital of Spain. Foreign reporters ask him, how do you propose to take Madrid? After all, it's the heart of the Popular Front government. It's the heart of the Spanish Republic. And he says, well, I have 4 columns outside the city and a 5th column inside. From that moment, 5th columnists means traitor. It is an agent of fascism within your society, working against your society and for a fascist takeover. 5th columnists is a major term in World War II, and to this day, if you say that somebody's acting as a 5th columnist, they're acting for a foreign power against your country for the sake of their beliefs rather than your country's interests. Now, there is a moment where the city of Salamanca, which is the university town where Unamuno teaches, is captured by the Spanish Foreign Legion and Capo de Ano. As the nationalists consolidate their power in Salamanca, they call a great gathering, and all the non-communist, non-Popular Front figures in Salamanca are invited to attend. And because Unamuno is a world-famous philosopher, he's on the stage and he's invited to speak. And everyone, Capo de Ano, certainly expects him to endorse the nationalist side, which is something Jose Ortega failed to do. Jose Ortega said, nobody is actually on my side or the side of the beliefs that I have, so I'm not exactly on anyone's side. Well, Unamuno goes up, and instead of giving a fiery speech about supporting the nationalist cause and speaking in a manner that long live death type Spanish foreign legionaries would understand, he goes into a nuanced description of why both sides have problems. He finishes his speech. Capo de Ano moves things along, and Unamuno does not see another day. He is quickly shot and killed as somebody who is unreliable to the nationalist cause. This was not the right audience for a nuanced speech about philosophy and politics and life. These guys were a bunch of hardcore killers, and they didn't want that, and so he ended up being hardcore killed for his nuance. The nationalists end up slowly closing the noose, and the popular government, the Popular Front government, the communists, and the international brigades are doing their best to fight back. Now, one of these foreigners who's fighting on the side of the socialists who run the Spanish Republic is George Orwell. George Orwell goes to Catalonia in eastern Spain and fights as part of the Catalonian militia. Orwell is, along with Doris Lessing, probably my favorite communist, because both of them are intellectually honest enough to see the bad sides of communism and the limits of communism and the way communism has been used as a force for evil in the world. And one of the reasons George Orwell begins to suspect that what's going on here is not what he thought communism was anyway, is the way that the Soviet NKVD acts in policing the left. Because now that the war is on, they want communists who are reliable to Moscow, or they want nobody. Orwell is clearly an independently thinking communist, so they mark him for death. And Orwell has to sneak out of Catalonia, a country that he didn't have to fight for, but that he put his life on the line for because he believed in his form of communism. And he ended up having to sneak back to England, and he wrote a book about it called Homage to Catalonia, which is an interesting book about what happened in Spain, but also about Orwell's coming to terms with the fact that the socialists and communists in Spain were brutal and thuggish, and not at all the kind of people he wanted running things. Late in the war, a Basque town in the mountains called Guernica is going to become world famous. Guernica is one of these old towns that's been around since Roman times. It's got very old homes. It's survived the fall of the Roman Empire. It was settled in Carthaginian times and before that by the Celtiberians, but it's been around. And one morning, it's destroyed in a couple of hours in an air attack by the Germans. The Germans, with nationalist symbols on their planes, bomb Guernica. They destroy the city. And the destruction of Guernica becomes something that the Republicans show all sympathetic journalists. And it becomes the subject of one of the world's most famous paintings, which you will see in the appendix video of additional materials called Guernica, which shows in a non-linear, non-logical, non-realistic way the explosions of life, the ripping apart of soul and spirit, the pain of it, the utter destruction and inhumanity of the destruction of Guernica. And it is one of the most effective anti-war paintings ever. But trust me, the Republicans did similar things to the nationalists. In the end, in 1939, early 1939, the Condor Legion goose steps down the streets of Berlin to cheering crowds and a welcome by Hitler because the Spanish Civil War is won. Generalissimo Francisco Franco is now the dictator, the caudillo of Spain, and he is going to rule Spain until his death in 1975. Franco is going to be friendly towards Hitler in World War II, but when the war starts, he consistently refuses to become an ally of Hitler because Spain, he says, is completely exhausted, which it was after 4+ years of civil war. There was no way it could join in World War II. And Franco refused to allow German forces to pass through Spain to attack the British, say, at their base at the Rock of Gibraltar. And because Spain did this, the British were protected here. This is one of the reasons why Franco's regime survives World War II. He is the only one of Hitler's allies that maintains power through the 1940s, 50s, 60s, into the 1970s. And Franco is the one who prevents communism from taking over Spain. He's also the one who returned Spain to royal and republic government. After his death, he set things up so that the Bourbon king Juan Carlos could become a caretaker and could establish a new Spanish government. So far, we have talked about the beginning phases of appeasement, but we've not yet talked about the heart, the fulcrum events, and that's going to all involve Germany next time.